At my cousin's wedding, my jealous sister threw hot coffee on my dress before family photos. She laughed, calling me not part of the family, as my parents joined in. I walked away in silence, but hours later, when they returned home, a shocking revenge froze every smile. My name is Rachel, and if there is one memory I can never erase from my life, it is the wedding in Miami where everything began. I was 28 then, old enough to know how cruel words can cut, but still foolish enough to hope that family would never be the one holding the knife. That night, surrounded by music, flowers, and the laughter of relatives, my sister reminded me that I was very much alone. The wedding was for my cousin, a girl the same age as me. We had grown up together, playing in each other's backyards, sharing secrets in middle school, and later comparing notes about work and relationships. She chose Miami for her big day, a grand hotel with palm trees lining the drive and lanterns strung across the garden. The sun was just beginning to set when the family gathered for photos. I remember smoothing my blue dress, a simple one, nothing flashy, but neat and respectable. I had been working long hours in those years, trying to make a career for myself, and I had saved up to look presentable that day. Megan, my younger sister, was 22 at the time. Where I was quiet, she was bold. Where I stayed in the background, she wanted the spotlight. I had always known she didn't like me much, but I had never expected what she did that evening. I was standing near the photo area, holding a glass of water and waiting for the photographer to call us over. Megan strolled toward me, holding a cup of coffee. I thought she was going to hand it to someone, but instead, with one careless motion, she tilted it forward. The coffee spilled down the front of my dress, soaking the fabric in seconds. I gasped, staring at the brown stains spreading like a wound across my chest and waist. Instead of apologizing, Megan laughed. She actually bent over, clutching her stomach, as though it was the funniest thing she had ever seen. "You are not a part of the family," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the chatter. Then she added, "Look at you, you really do look like a homeless guest." The words hit harder than the coffee. I froze, wishing the ground would open beneath me. My face burned, but I forced myself to stand still, to breathe. Around me, the others chuckled. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had known me all my life, laughed at the joke. And worst of all, my parents said nothing. They stood nearby, watching, their expressions blank. Not one word of defense came from them. Not one. I kept my head down, smiling faintly, as though nothing mattered. But inside, something shifted. A line was drawn that night. I knew in that moment that I would never forget. We took the photos anyway. I stood at the edge of the group, my stained dress glaring in every shot. I pretended to laugh when someone cracked a joke, but the sound felt hollow. Every click of the camera reminded me that humiliation can be permanent, frozen in time for everyone to see. After the photos, I slipped away to the bathroom, locking myself inside. I stared at the mirror, at the brown streaks running down my dress, at the redness in my eyes. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I whispered to myself, "Remember this." I repeated it again and again until the words settled deep into me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People danced, glasses clinked, music blared. I stood with a plate in my hand, pushing food around without tasting it. Megan paraded around in her glittering dress, laughing with relatives, soaking up the attention. My parents joined in, smiling at her jokes, as if nothing had happened. Nobody came to me. Nobody asked how I felt. That was the night I learned how easy it was to be erased, even from your own family. I smiled through it all, but my heart had grown heavier. When the wedding ended and I returned to my apartment, I sat in the dark, my dress still stained, my shoes still on. I whispered again, "Remember this." And I did. In the years that followed, that memory became a quiet companion. It fueled me in ways I never admitted out loud. I worked harder than ever. I stayed late at the office, volunteered for projects no one else wanted, learned everything I could about the business world. Slowly, I built a reputation, then a position, and finally, ownership in a company. By my mid-30s, I was a co-owner of a respected firm in New York City. People who once overlooked me now sought my opinion. My voice carried weight in rooms where decisions shaped futures. But no matter how far I climbed, I could still hear Megan's laugh echoing in my ears. I could still see my parents' silence. That humiliation had carved a mark inside me, one I never tried to heal. When Megan called me years later, her voice was very different from the mocking tone she had used in Miami. She sounded desperate. She was in her early 30s now, still trying to find her place in the world. She told me she had heard about my company, about the opportunities there, and she wanted my help. "Rachel," she said, "please. I really need this. You could put in a word for me, couldn't you?" I listened in silence, remembering her words at the wedding. "You are not a part of the family." I almost laughed at the irony, but I kept my voice calm, steady. "I'll see what I can do," I told her. Inside, I already knew what I would do. When I hung up the phone, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Memories of that night in Miami replayed, sharp and vivid. The spilled coffee, the laughter, the silence of my parents. My promise to myself. I felt it stir inside me again, the quiet vow I had made years ago. Remember this. That was the beginning of the end, though Megan didn't know it yet. She thought she was walking toward her chance at success. She thought I was going to help her. What she didn't know was that I had been waiting for this moment all my life. And I would not waste it. When Megan first asked for my help, I could almost hear the hesitation in her voice, as if she already knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. But desperation makes people bold, and she had no choice but to swallow her pride. I let her speak, pretending to weigh her words carefully, even though my mind was already made up. She told me how she'd been applying to jobs, how nothing seemed to work out, and how much she admired what I had built. I almost laughed at the thought of Megan admiring anything about me. I didn't show it. Instead, I softened my voice, told her I would see what I could do, and reminded her that the process would be competitive. She thanked me over and over, her voice warm, almost pleading. It was strange to hear my sister like that. She had spent her youth ridiculing me, and now she was leaning on me like I was her lifeline. After the call, I sat at my desk in New York, staring out at the skyline. The city buzzed with energy, but I was still caught in the quiet memory of Miami, the smell of coffee, the sting of laughter. It had been years, but the wound had never healed. And now, fate had circled back. I thought about whether helping her would change anything, whether forgiveness was even possible. But every time I tried to imagine it, I saw her smirk at the wedding, and the answer was clear. The process began. Megan submitted her application. She was qualified enough, at least on paper. My company was looking for someone in her field, and she managed to get through the initial screenings. I didn't interfere. I let her move forward, watched her progress step by step, and never gave her any reason to suspect what was waiting at the end. During those weeks, she called me often. Sometimes she wanted advice, sometimes reassurance. She sounded nervous, eager to please. I listened, offered her small bits of encouragement, nothing more. I didn't lie, but I also didn't reveal the truth, that when it came to the final interview, she would find me sitting across the table, holding her future in my hands. I often thought about my parents during that time. They were in their mid-60s now, still close to Megan, still indifferent toward me. I had never confronted them about that night. I never asked why they had stayed silent, why they had let her mock me without a word. Maybe they thought it was just harmless teasing. Maybe they truly didn't care. Either way, the damage had been done, and their silence still echoed as loudly as Megan's laughter. Part of me wanted to tell them about the interview, to let them know that the balance had shifted. But I didn't. This was between Megan and me. They had chosen their side long ago. The day of the interview crept closer, and with it came an odd restlessness in me. I had worked so hard to bury the past, but now it was rising again, sharp and alive. Some nights, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, imagining Megan's face when she saw me in the boardroom. Would she stammer? Would she pretend nothing had happened? Would she beg? One evening, a week before the interview, Megan called me again. Her voice was lighter this time, almost cheerful. "Rachel," she said, "I think I have a real chance." Thank you for putting me forward. I know we've had our differences, but this means a lot. I sat in silence for a long moment before answering. Her words dripped with irony. Differences. That was what she called it? Not cruelty, not humiliation, not betrayal. Just differences. You're welcome, I finally said, keeping my tone even. Do your best in the interview. That's all that matters. She thanked me again, unaware that every word pushed me closer to the edge of decision. The morning of the interview arrived bright and cold in New York. I woke earlier than usual, dressed in my sharpest suit, and took a long look in the mirror. I didn't see the woman with the stained dress anymore. I didn't see the girl forced to laugh while her family mocked her. I saw a co-owner of a thriving company, someone who had earned every inch of ground beneath her feet. When I reached the office, the boardroom was already being prepared. The long table gleamed under the lights, and the chairs were neatly arranged. My fellow board members chatted casually, going over the list of candidates. None of them knew what was about to unfold. For them, this was just another interview. For me, it was the moment I had been carrying in my heart for years. Megan arrived on time. I heard her voice outside the door before I saw her. She was polite, professional, even charming. Then the assistant opened the door, and she walked in. The instant her eyes landed on me, she froze. Her smile faltered, her confidence crumbled. She looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. I sat at the head of the table, my expression calm, my hands folded neatly. I didn't say a word. She tried to recover, forcing a smile, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew. She remembered. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, before one of the other board members began the interview. I watched her struggle to answer questions, her voice trembling at times, her eyes darting back to me as if begging for mercy. I gave her nothing. No smile, no nod, no sign of comfort. Only silence. For the first time, Megan was the one under scrutiny, and I was the one holding the power. That day, sitting at the head of the table, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always come with shouting or anger. Sometimes it comes with silence, with the same quiet composure you once used to survive humiliation. The interview ended. Megan gathered her papers, thanked the board, and risked one last glance at me. I met her eyes and gave her a smile. The same kind of smile she had given me years ago in Miami, when coffee dripped down my dress and laughter filled the room. She knew exactly what it meant. When the interview ended and Megan stepped out of the boardroom, the air seemed lighter. The other board members carried on with their notes and discussions, talking about her performance the same way they would talk about any other candidate. To them, she was just another name on a list, another face in the crowd. But for me, that moment was years in the making. I sat quietly, listening to their comments. One member said she seemed nervous, another thought she had potential but lacked confidence, and a third pointed out that her answers weren't strong enough to stand out. Nobody suspected the real reason she had stumbled, the real reason she had lost her footing. That was mine to keep. I didn't contribute much to the conversation. I nodded when necessary, scribbled a few notes, and waited for the session to end. Inside, though, I could feel something shifting. Walking back to my office, I thought about how far we had come, Megan and I. From that night in Miami, where she spilled coffee down my dress and laughed, to this boardroom in New York, where she couldn't even meet my eyes without faltering. Life has a way of circling back, and that day it had completed the circle. I remembered her exact words at the wedding, spoken with that cruel grin. "You are not a part of the family. You look like a homeless guest." She had wanted to humiliate me, and she succeeded. She made me invisible, and everyone around us joined her in that laughter. My parents, standing close by, didn't raise a word in my defense. Their silence had burned just as much as her insult. That moment had branded me, and I carried it into every late night at work, every fight to prove myself in a world that didn't expect much from me. Now the roles had reversed. She had asked me for help, thinking she could lean on the same sister she had mocked. And I had given her nothing but silence, the same silence my parents had once given me. There was something poetic about it, and I savored it quietly. Later that afternoon, as I was finishing paperwork, I got a message that Megan was waiting in the lobby. I wasn't surprised. She couldn't leave things as they were. She would want to talk, to beg, maybe to explain away her behavior at the interview. I told the receptionist to let her come up. When she entered my office, she looked different from the confident sister I remembered. Her shoulders were tense, her voice shaky when she said hello. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. I leaned back in my chair, calm and collected, while she shifted nervously in front of me. "Rachel," she began, "I didn't know you'd be there today. You should have told me." Her words made me want to laugh. I should have told her? Did she warn me before she dumped coffee on me all those years ago? Did she prepare me before calling me a homeless guest in front of everyone? Of course not. Instead of saying any of that, I kept my voice steady. "Why would I need to tell you? You were applying for a job at my company. It was only natural I'd be there." Her face reddened. She fumbled for words. I was nervous. I didn't expect to see you in that position. You've done well for yourself. Really well." There was a trace of bitterness in her tone, though she tried to hide it. I let her speak, let her struggle, and then asked quietly, "Why do you want this job so badly, Megan?" She sighed and sat down across from me. "Because I need it. Things haven't gone the way I planned. I've had setbacks, and I know I could do well here if someone just gave me a chance." I folded my hands on the desk. "A chance," I repeated softly. "That's what you think you deserve?" She nodded quickly. "Yes. Please, Rachel. I know I wasn't always kind to you, but that was years ago. We were young. Don't hold it against me now." Her words twisted inside me. We were young. That was her excuse? As if age excused cruelty. As if time erased the sting of public humiliation. I could still hear the laughter, still see my parents' indifference. I could still feel the fabric of my dress, wet and sticky with coffee. I hadn't forgotten. I never would. I looked at her carefully and said, "Do you remember Miami?" Her eyes widened. She shifted in her seat. "Rachel, that was... Do you remember what you said to me that night?" I interrupted, my voice sharper now. "Do you remember calling me a homeless guest? Do you remember telling me I wasn't part of the family? Do you remember spilling coffee down my dress and laughing while everyone else laughed with you?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her eyes darted away, shame flickering across her face. "I remember," I continued, my voice calm again. "I remember it every day. And now, so do you." Silence filled the room. She tried to gather herself, tried to find a defense, but there was none. Eventually she whispered, "I'm sorry." 2 words. That was all she had. Too little, too late. I leaned back in my chair, giving her the same smile she had once given me, polished and fake. "Your interview is over, Megan. We'll be in touch with our decision." Her face crumbled. She understood. She stood slowly, her hands trembling as she gathered her things. She wanted to say more, but she didn't. She just walked to the door, paused for one last look, and left. I sat in the silence that followed, feeling the weight of the years lift slightly off my shoulders. I had kept my promise to myself. I had remembered. That night, when I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. I thought about everything that had happened. Revenge, I realized, didn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes it came in moments like these, quiet and controlled, where the balance was finally restored. But even as I sat there, a part of me felt unsettled. The story wasn't finished yet. Megan would not simply walk away and accept her defeat. I knew her too well. She would come back, one way or another. And when she did, I would be ready. I had thought the interview would be the end of it. That once Megan saw the truth laid bare in that boardroom, she would finally understand. But I should have known better. My sister had always been stubborn, always unwilling to accept responsibility for her actions. A week passed before I heard from her again, but when her name flashed on my phone, I wasn't surprised. Her voice was sharper this time, stripped of the false sweetness she had used before. "Rachel," she said, "I don't think this is fair. You're letting old things get in the way of my future." I sat in silence for a long moment, letting her words hang. Old things, she called them, as if they were dust on a shelf, meaningless and forgotten. But for me, they had never been old. They had been alive, breathing with me through every step of my life, pushing me to work harder, to fight for my place. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. You think spilling coffee on me in front of our family and calling me a homeless guest was an old thing? You think telling me I wasn't part of the family was a joke I should forget? She sighed, clearly annoyed. Rachel, we were kids. Everyone laughed, even Mom and Dad. Why are you still holding on to it? You've built this amazing life. You're successful. You've won. Isn't that enough? Her words stung, not because they were true, but because they revealed how little she understood. Success hadn't erased the pain. Success had only made the memory sharper, a reminder of what I had overcome without her or anyone else in my family by my side. I remember everything, I said softly, and I promised myself that I would never forget. This isn't about winning, Megan. This is about justice. She grew quiet, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, So you're going to ruin me for one mistake? I almost laughed. One mistake. That was her version of the truth. To her, it was just one careless act, one cruel joke. But to me, it was the moment my family decided I didn't belong. It was the moment my parents' silence spoke louder than any words. It was the moment my sister's laughter carved a scar I would carry for the rest of my life. I didn't ruin you, I told her. You did that yourself. I just remembered. She hung up on me then, the click sharp in my ear. For a while, I sat in the silence, staring at the city outside my window. I thought about the wedding, about my parents, about the years I had spent working in silence while Megan danced through life without a care. And I thought about how, in the end, life had brought her back to me, asking for the very thing she once swore I didn't deserve, a place to belong. In the days that followed, word spread through the company that Megan's candidacy had been rejected. No one questioned it. The board had found her performance weak, her answers lacking. To them, it was a routine decision. To me, it was the closing of a chapter. But closure is never as clean as we imagine. One evening, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was cautious, almost cold. Your sister tells me you blocked her job at your company. Is it true? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her question. She wasn't the right fit, I said simply. My mother sighed. Rachel, she's your sister. Family should help each other. I wanted to scream, to ask where that family loyalty had been when Megan humiliated me in Miami. I wanted to remind her of her own silence, the way she and my father had stood there and done nothing. But I didn't. I kept my voice calm, just as I always had. Families should protect each other, I replied. That night, no one protected me. There was silence on the other end. She didn't argue, didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge the truth. She just said, think about it, and hung up. I set the phone down and laughed, a bitter, quiet laugh. Think about it. I had thought about it every day for years. They had never thought about me. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed everything in my mind. The wedding, the laughter, the silence, the boardroom, the look on Megan's face when she realized I was the one in control. It all wove together into a single thread, pulling tight until it finally broke. Revenge isn't always sweet. Sometimes it's heavy, like a stone in your chest. I didn't feel joy in rejecting her. I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was balance, the scales tipping back after years of being lopsided. For once, I wasn't the one humiliated. For once, she knew what it was like to be powerless. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window again, watching the lights flicker across the city. I thought about what Megan had said, about how I had won. Maybe I had, but winning wasn't the point. The point was remembering. The point was keeping the promise I made to myself in that bathroom years ago, staring at my ruined dress in the mirror. Never forget. And I hadn't. The next morning, I woke up early, ready for another day at the company. The world outside moved on, unaware of the storm that had passed between two sisters. My colleagues would never know the story behind the rejection, and that was fine. It wasn't theirs to carry. But Megan knew. And so did I. The scar she gave me in Miami would never fade, but neither would the memory of her frozen face in the boardroom. That was enough. That was justice. And though the world kept turning, though new challenges came with every sunrise, I held that memory close. Not to dwell on it, not to live in the past, but to remind myself of who I had become. Because in the end, the girl with the stained dress had grown into the woman who decided the outcome. And nothing Megan could say or do would ever take that away.